Today, I'm joined by Greg Roche. Greg is the founder of Retention and Rewards Partners, where he helps companies improve engagement and retention by teaching employees how to build the kinds of professional relationships that make them want to stay. A former HR executive who once found himself jobless and disconnected, Greg turned that moment into a mission, helping people form real connections without relying on cold calls or awkward mixers. Today, he works with HR leaders to create cultures rooted in trust and connection. Greg is the author of the Fast and Easy Guide to Networking for Introverts and a frequent speaker based in Denver, Colorado. And I'm excited to have him on the program to learn from his expertise. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm really interested in this idea of networking and communication and relationships, especially as it revolves around introverts. Because I think,
Mhm.
I mentioned before we press record, I have an affinity towards introverts. I've worked with a lot in my past, and they always seem to have like a lot of great ideas, and a lot of people, a lot of leaders overlook introverts because they're quieter. And so I'm really curious, and about what you've learned and kind of what you teach with respect to introverts. So let's get started. So I talked about in the introduction, you experienced a major career shift when you lost your role as in HR, and then you realized you had no network to fall back on. Now, how did
Mhm.
that moment reshape your approach to professional relationships?
I thought that if you just went to work and you did a really good job, you would never get fired. And that first layoff really proved that wrong. I realized I couldn't just be an individual. I could take control and focus on what I could do, but I needed other people to help me. And I'd always kind of been this person who grew up thinking, I was just going to do it on my own. I was just going to be an individual. I was going to succeed or fail on my own. And what I realized in that moment was you need other people. You need other people in your life. You need other people to help you. And that was a tough moment for me because I had never really focused on fostering those kind of relationships. I had friendships and things like that, but I never went to networking events because as an introvert, those things kind of drained my energy. And I hadn't done anything, so I realized I was going to have to figure out a way to do this. Otherwise, it was going to be really difficult to find another job. But I didn't do it the same way everybody told me to do. I came up with a different way to approach it that worked for me, and it worked for my style. I could do it on my schedule. I could kind of do it in my own space, which is, whether I did it online or on the phone or on a video call or in person, it was kind of up to me. So that was where I really learned how to form relationships on a real consistent basis in a way that didn't feel awkward to me.
Very interesting. I know when my last big corporate job, I was also let go. So, and
Mm.
what I realized at the time is that I didn't have that network to fall back on. So
Mhm.
you almost think that like, you need that network. You should build it when you don't need it, so it's there when you need it. And I learned that lesson myself, and so I sort of corrected that, going forward. But do you find that where a lot of people find themselves in those such situations where uh, the network, they let the network go stale, and then when they need it, it's not there for them? Do you feel other people have talked about that?
We all learned that lesson the hard way. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I learned it that way. Lots of people I talk to learn it the same way. I can tell people every day on LinkedIn. I can tell them in my newsletter. I can tell them in my book. I can tell them over and over and over. You need to be networking when you don't need anything.
Yeah.
You need to be
Yeah.
out making those connections. And I think that people think, well, I'll do it eventually. I'll do it next week or I'll do it next month. I'll get on it. And it's just something you put off and you put off and you put off because you don't feel that sort of urgent need. There's other things that are priorities at the time. So it is difficult for people who haven't learned that lesson the hard way to make it a priority and really set aside time to do it.
Mm.
I try to, again, say that every single day and give examples of myself or other people I've met or other people I know to tell them, don't wait for this to happen. We've all, don't make this mistake. Unfortunately, again, like everything in life, we mostly learn things the hard way. I try to break it down for people and say this thing that you are calling networking that probably sounds like a lot of work can be done in a few minutes a day, a few minutes a week, a couple hours a week. You don't have to spend hours going to events trying to figure out where to go. Because I think that's why people don't do it in advance is they think it's something that's going to take a lot of time. And they say, I'm busy with work, I'm busy with my family, I'm busy with whatever's going on. They don't realize that networking doesn't have to be a big event, a big room full of people where you're shaking a bunch of hands and spending a bunch of time. It can be as simple as reaching out to maybe someone who you worked with 5, 10 years ago who you've kind of lost touch with, but you're curious about what they're doing and just reaching out and saying, hey, it's been a while since we talked, was wondering how you're doing. Let's find a time to catch up. That
Mm.
can be networking. And what that can lead to is talking to that person, find out about what they're working on, figuring out how you can help them. And then they say, how can I help you? And if you have a really good idea of like, hey, here's who I want to be connected with, or here's companies I want to learn about, or here's things I want to learn about, they can connect you and introduce you to somebody new. You can do that, and that's how your network grows. And so that's a pretty straightforward process. I mean, there's a lot of details in what I just described, but that's network. And people don't think of it like that. And so that's why I think they don't do it before they need it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So in developing a networking strategy for you as an introvert, so is this what it's based on? It's more like the one-on-one versus the public, going to networking events and that sort of thing.
100%. I really focus on telling people to grow at one on one. Now, it doesn't have to be just one at a time. You could have multiple people you've reached out to who you want to get back in touch with. And I recommend that
Hmm.
because sometimes when you're getting back in touch with people or you're reaching out to people, they're going to take a while to get back to you. And they maybe are busy, they sit on the message, they don't get back to you right away, or by the time you coordinate a conversation, it's maybe a few weeks out. So you can be talking to multiple people at any one time, but you're not going to a big, again, room of people. You're not trying to talk to 10 people in an hour. You're trying to talk to one person through one message that leads to one conversation that leads to you helping each other and getting introduced to somebody new. So that really gives you back control as well because you're figuring out who do I want to reach out to? Who do I want to get in touch with? Who do I want to meet and get introduced to? Instead of you go to an event, you don't know who's going to be there. I mean, you might have an idea what industry they're going to be in or what their interests are, but you have no idea who's going to be in the room. So they may or may not be the person you want to meet. You can't pick the time. The organizer picked the time. You can't pick the location. It could be on the other side of town. All these things are out of your control when you're going to these events. Not to mention if you're introverted and you don't really like rooms full of people, or not that you don't like them, but they tend to overwhelm you a little bit. You avoid that, right? Again, you think of reasons why you can't go. So when you think of it more as a one-to-one sort of interaction, it sounds less efficient because it's a one-to-one, but in reality, you're making connections that are going to be way more productive for you, and they're going to be, relationships that grow your network through these introductions. And so it's actually more efficient, I think, than trying to go and meet 10 people in an hour and then maybe one out of 10 or two out of 10 turns into any other conversation and maybe not. So again, it's just how do you focus your time? How do you focus your energies? Like I said, I like it because I'm in control of that. And I can figure out if I need to do more, if I really need to be reaching out to people, I can reach out to more people. If I'm kind of overwhelmed and busy right now, I only have to reach out to one person this week. So it's all about making it fit within your life and figuring out what you can do, what works with your life. But what's most important is that you do it consistently. It's like anything else we do that's really good for us. You gotta do it consistently, right? If it's
Yeah.
eating consistently, if it's working out consistently, if it's writing, if it's talking to your family, doing that stuff consistently is the most important part. So you got to figure out what can you do, how can you be consistent with it to really make it a part of who you are as opposed to just something that you do.
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because I keep thinking about it. The idea of keeping your connections and your networking fresh, especially when you don't need anything. I think that's probably one of the things that I have a few contacts, I guess, network contacts that
Mhm.
they'll only call me when they need something, and it's fine. And I didn't generally try to help
Yeah.
everyone.
Right.
But I always think it's better to have that connection when you don't need someone,
Hmm.
that, and then having, keep that fresh, as you said, make it sort of a part of what you're doing, so that when you do need someone, or you ask for a favor, hey, can you introduce
Hmm.
me to such and such, is that it's not the first time they've heard from you,
Hmm.
in 10 years, right? And so is that what you're talking about too, as far as like, having a discipline to keep your network fresh, so that when you do need to call, that it's not the first time they've heard from you in a while, right?
That's the ideal. That's
Yeah.
the that's also the reason I think we sometimes hesitate to network. We've been on the other end of that.
Right.
We've been on the end where somebody called us up and said, I need something. Can you help me? Of course, we want to help them. But like you said, in the back of our mind, we're thinking to ourselves, you only call me when you need something. And
Right.
that doesn't feel great.
Right.
We don't want to be people that do that.
Right.
And if we wait too long to start our networking and then we jump on it because we need a job or we think we're going to need a job, we hesitate because we say, I'm going to be that person who's reaching out and I haven't talked to this person, so it's going to be awkward. I think there's ways to approach that can kind of offset some of that a little bit even if you are looking for a job. And I think it's how you come at it. But you're right. That's the ideal, is to connect with people off and on throughout the years, so that it's not just, I haven't heard from Greg in 5 years. And now the first thing he sends to me is a note that says, hey, I'm looking for a job. I see you know somebody at this company. Could you help me out?
Yeah.
At the same time, you could reach out to somebody and be like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while, would love to catch up. And you can go into it and have a conversation with that person. And at the end of it, get to a point where they go, what can I do for you? And you can say, hey, I know that you know somebody at this place. I'm interested in that company. Could you introduce me? So even if you're in that situation, I think you can navigate that conversation in a way that if you take a little bit of time, spend a little time with the person, listen to them, and potentially try to find a way to help them in some way. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be a small piece of advice or a recommendation, or you can intro them to somebody, something small that shows that you're willing to help them out first. Then they'll probably say, what can I do for you? And they're basically giving you permission to say, oh, okay, well, here's really what I would love for you to do, which is introduce me to somebody new. So even if you're in that situation, I think there's ways to navigate it so that it doesn't come across as the first message you send to this person that you haven't talked to in 5 years is, I need something from you. That's just, again, puts a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And even if they do want to help you, they're kind of not doing it from a place of really feeling like they want to they don't really, they're doing it because you're friends, but they don't really want to. And if it's
Yeah.
too much to ask, often the ask is too much to ask. They'll be like, okay, I'll get to it. And then they'll get busy, they'll do other things, and they don't get around to it. So you've kind of lost your chance with them, if you don't navigate it correctly. But I think there's ways to do it that
Yeah.
that make it less awkward.
And I think like, to your point, I think, doing the one-on-one is a way that I think is a little more natural for
Hmm.
introverts as well. And so it's
Yeah.
sort of, I'm like you, I've been to many networking events, and it's a crapshoot of whether or not you're gonna get anything out of it,
Hmm.
versus a direct approach where you actually know people, and
Hmm.
you have relationships with them. That seems like it's a much more straightforward process, even even if it maybe seems less efficient. It seems like it's probably a more
Hmm.
effective means
Yeah.
of connecting with your network. That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. So
Yeah.
um you'll go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, and I think people are more likely to do it again,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if they're more introverted.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, the book you wrote is called "The Fast and Easy Guide for to Networking for Introverts." What's another maybe actionable takeaway from the book that listeners can start doing if they fall into that category?
Well, in the book, I talk about my whole approach, the sort of steps to it, and I ran through them really quickly a little bit earlier, and I go to more detail in the book. One of the first things to really do, I would say the actionable thing you can do to get started, because people will typically say, I don't know where to start.
Mm,
And I always say, well, start with who you know. They'll say, okay, well, that's great, but I need to meet new people to grow my network. Why would I start with who I know? I say, yeah, that's where we're going to start. That's not where we're going to end. We're going to start with who you already know. We're going to use the networks that those people have to get introduced to new people, because we really meet people through proximity, which is people who are geographically or organizationally close to us. So people who live near us, people who worked with us. That's kind of how most of the people in our life come into our lives. And so we know them through those shared experiences. But then the second way is those people introduce us to new people. So people that they know. So it's not that when you're going out networking, let's say you're networking to find a job, you're not necessarily networking with the hiring manager or the person who's going to hire you. You're trying to meet people who maybe know that person.
mm,
And so those might be the people you already know. So I would say, I tell people a lot of times, think about all the people you've worked with in the past, and they've probably moved on to other companies. Maybe you've moved on to another company, and really think about who you worked with on a pretty frequent basis. People you liked, right? You're not going to reconnect with somebody who you didn't get along with, because again, you're in control. You can pick who you want to network with. So you kind of you could go through your resume, the experience section, or you do this on LinkedIn in your experience there. Just kind of go through the companies and think about who worked there, who did I interact with, who did I have conversations with, who did I get emails with from on a regular basis, and start to kind of make a list of those names and just keep going through each part of your experience section until you've got this list of people. Now, it doesn't have to be 100 people long. In fact, I'd recommend you only try to get to about 10 names to start with. And start there. And that's your list. That's where you start. And you go, okay, today I'm going to send this person a note, and I'm just going to say, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I remember when we worked at such and such a place. You crossed my mind the other day. I was wondering what was going on with you. You know, something like that. Email, text, message through LinkedIn, however you can get in touch with them, and just start there. And then that's going to lead to a conversation, hopefully, where you can get on a phone call or a video call, or maybe you meet them in person, but you really get into a conversation with them. And that's what you can do to just start networking. And people go, that doesn't feel like networking. That feels like catching up. Okay, great. If that's what you got to tell yourself, just say, I'm going to catch up with people. And I'll
yeah.
tell people that. And I will have people come back to me and say, that was not only productive because I got in touch with somebody, but it was actually fun. Like I had a
Mm,
good time, and it was a
yeah.
good conversation, and we caught up, and we both kind of talked about what we were working on. And now they're going to introduce me to somebody new, and I'm going to introduce them to somebody new. And it didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel like I think networking is supposed to feel. That's really what I'm trying to do in the world, is change the way people feel about networking, is to not make it awkward and transactional, and to make it something that people actually look forward to doing. So I mean, if somebody's thinking, where do I start? That's the first place I would start. That's what I talk about in my book. That's what I talk about in everything I whenever I'm having these conversations, that's part of what I say, is start with who you know and go from there.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And if I think about, my job search that I went through, it was this similar thing. Like I kept thinking about who do I know? Who haven't I talked to in a while? Who might be connected to,
Hmm.
some of the target companies I'm going after? And the truth of the matter is I found my next corporate job through a connection, through a relationship. And I think most people will
Hmm.
find their next job
Yeah.
through a connection and not through, responding to job openings or whatever,
Yeah.
job boards and things like that. So it's
Yep.
very, very important, very critical.
Hmm.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit. And talk a little bit about employee retention. So could you kind of work on that area as
Yeah.
well? And you say that, it's a lot of HR people work on, compensation packages,
Hmm.
perks, that sort of thing. But you say a
Hmm.
better way is building relationships, connections. You call them trust-based connections.
Hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's so critical inside of businesses?
You said it people work on compensation and benefits. That's what I did for most of my career. It's what I still do. I have a consulting company that, and in retention and rewards partners, we talk about connection, but I also, if somebody says, hey, will you look at our compensation or look at our bonus plan? I do that too. What I learned is that's not what keeps people at companies.
Yeah.
I would all the companies I worked for routinely get a leader who comes in and says, hey, I need you to make a counteroffer for this person. They just handed in their resignation. They're heading out the door. We got to save them. And I would always say, okay, I'll give it the best shot I can. I'll see what we can come up with. But you have to realize this person didn't leave today. This
Mm.
person left 2 or 3 months ago when they decided I'm going to take that call from that recruiter or I'm going to see what's out there. Because if you think about what it takes to get a job offer, in most corporate environments, it's not one day you decide and the next day you have a new job. This person's emotionally gone. You've really already lost them. If you make a counteroffer and they stay, they're just going to use that offer to try to get a better offer from the place where they were interviewing.
Yeah.
And, if they don't, they're probably going to leave in 6 to 12 months anyway. You just buy yourself a little time. So, what I've been trying to do is take this idea of connection, same sort of thing with networking and real professional relationships, and think, how can we turn that inside of a company and help leaders or managers foster more professional relations within their organization, right? So give people connection to the organization so that they don't want to leave. And I think a lot of people leave when they feel like, I don't know anybody, nobody knows me, I could be doing this job anywhere. It doesn't matter if I stay here. So if I'm not connected, it's easy for me to leave. But if I've developed professional relationships, if I generally like working with the people, I don't want to say we just get along, because you can have plenty of tension and conflict in an organization and everybody still enjoys working with each other. But if you don't really know the people, again, number one, it doesn't give you very much connection. Number two, you don't work very well together. If you don't know the other person as more than just a name on the email that goes into your inbox, you probably don't really have much invested in the collective success of the organization. If you've spent some time getting to know people or talking to them or having conversations with them and seeing, how did they get there? What makes them tick? What are their priorities? What's their agenda? What are they focused on? You're going to be able to solve problems much more quickly. And I know personally in a lot of organizations I worked in, I would know people in other departments that were not on my team, but they were sort of related to the work I was doing. Once I had those relationships, when the problem came up, I could just go to that person and say, hey, here's what's going on. We got this issue. Here's how I think we can solve it. Can you work with me on this and we can get this solved? And a lot of times, because we had talked to each other and had a relationship before I brought them a problem, they would go, yeah, let's just do this. Here we go. I got that. We fixed it, and we fix it. Whereas if I don't know that person and I shoot an email over and it's like, Eric in accounting is like giving me hassle because he's saying that the compensation is, bonus plan is going over budget. And, I just flip that to my boss and it gets escalated and he escalates it to his boss. And then we're all in meetings and there's work streams and we're trying to sort this all out. But a lot of times I knew Eric and I went over and it's like, Eric, here's where we're at. Here's what's going on. He'd be like, okay, well, thanks for telling me. It's not great. We still got a problem to solve, but let's work on it. We get it worked out, done. It's done. We move on. So I talk about it from the idea of retaining people, but there's another benefit there is your organization works better when people know each other, when people have had conversations. And I think we used to be better at this in the workplace. And it's not just COVID, it's not just hybrid work. It's part of that, but I think there's technology. I think people just don't spend much time investing in the relationships at work anymore. And it has an impact on how effective we can be as an organization. And it also causes people to say, I'm not really attached. I don't feel much belonging. It's all sorts of loneliness epidemic at work. And when that happens, people are like, no reason to stay. So
Yeah.
I'm out the door. So it feeds into a lot of it. And I really talk about how do you how do you help people see, like, get intentional about creating those relationships, not just waiting for them to happen on accident, but I would always, one actionable thing I always tell people is if I was telling managers or leaders who are running a team, if I was in my team meeting, I'd say to my team, hey, I want you to take one person who you get an email from on a sort of regular basis, whose name you know, but who you've never talked to, never had a conversation with. And this week, I want you to reach out to them and have a 15-minute conversation with them and talk to them, not about work or problem. Just say, hey, I'm just doing this to reach out to get to know you. I realize we share a lot of back and forth emails, but we've never really talked. How did you get here? Like, how did you end up in this role? Where'd you come
I
from? What
love
have you
this.
done? And then just start talking like that, and see where that goes in terms of forming those relationships and helping people feel a little more connected to each other in the organization.
I love that. I heard a veteran, I'm a military veteran, and I
Mhm.
heard a veteran talking about what it was like to transition from the military to business. And he said, the job is so much easier, but the relationships are so much harder. Like, I
Mhm.
think the jobs we had in the military are really hard, but we were like,
Mhm.
we were thrust together into these,
Mhm.
unique and dangerous sometimes
Yep.
situations. Then we built these strong bonds, and so we had
Mhm.
each other's back. We had deep relationships with each other. The job was
Mhm.
hard, but the relationships were easy. And I think,
Mm.
like, I found myself similar to this veteran. Like, the job seemed easier, but the connections were harder. Like, I
Mhm.
I remember my first job outside the military. I was talking to a few people I was working with at the time. I said, "Hey, you guys want to, go to the bar tonight? You want to go
Mhm.
hang out?" And they're like, "No, we got families. We're going home." And we're like,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
military, we'd always be together. We'd be together
Right.
at work, and we'd
Yeah.
be together after work. And so I found it initially really hard making
Mhm.
that transition. So
Yeah.
I love what you're talking about here, which is sort of being intentional about even building relationships even within work.
Mhm.
And I know this great book called First Break All the Rules. Marcus Buckingham
Mhm.
wrote it, and he says the
Mhm.
number one thing that you need to look for in someone that's going to be stay with your company and be successful is, do they have a best friend at work? And
Yeah.
it sort of ties a little bit what you say is that
It,
people leave when they don't feel a connection, right?
it,
And
yeah.
so that's and I think you're right. I think today there's a
Mhm.
bigger problem than we've ever
Mhm.
had in terms of building those
Yeah.
connections. Yeah.
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 That statement is and I'm sure it's all related, is a question in Gallup's employee engagement survey that they
Yes.
do. So Gallup does employee engagement surveys, and they have that question, is I have a best friend at work. And they find over and over and over again people who say yes to that or have a, higher on that scale stay longer.
Yeah.
They've just shown that over and over. And it makes people, and I say people, in my experience, it makes people in HR really uncomfortable. They don't like this idea of like best friend
Yes.
at work because they think of all these other weird things that could happen with relationships at work. But they're missing the point. They're missing the
Yes.
point that deep connection with somebody else keeps you in a place.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're going to go and create opportunities for people to become best friends, but any connection, whether it's best friend or just professional acquaintance, is better than nothing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like as you move towards that friend thing, it's still more and more connections. So you're not like, oh, I'm going to pair everybody up and they're going to become best friends. That's not what we're talking about doing, but we're talking about the idea that people who are connected and feel closer to the people they're around are more willing to stay there. And
Mm.
that's really, the piece of this that I think people go, okay, but what do we do? How do we do this? Because as a leader, you say all my people are adults, they'll go make friendships. They'll do it on their own.
Yeah.
Or we're going to have happy hours, right? Or we're going to have like a big team building activity. Again, back to the introvert thing, at least half of your people are dreading that event.
Yeah.
Even if it's people they work with, they're like, great, I got to go do this thing. Okay, I'll go do it, but I'm not really going to enjoy it. So it's that tends to be what people do instead of saying, hey, I want you to just go find one person and find one person that you really don't know and haven't talked to and just have a conversation with them. Make it a little bit, lower risk, a little bit easier to approach, something that people are actually going to maybe do and turn into a conversation that turns into a relationship.
Man, I love it. It seems so simple, but in my experience, I can see where that could work, and I think it
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense, especially for those that maybe are not into the big networking
Yeah.
event or the let's all go out to for a beer together. The
Hmm.
one-on-one. I think
Hmm.
I think that fits a lot with more an introvert's personality, and I think you can still be very effective having
Hmm.
multiple one-on-one conversations. So it
Hmm.
makes so much sense. Greg, this has been fantastic. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
The idea that, and you kind of said it, things that seem simple tend to get overlooked.
Yeah.
We take for granted the things that are simple. Part of that is talking to a person, listening to a person, really trying to understand what they're saying, and then thinking, how can I help this person? I tell people that all the time, and they do. They go, this is really simple. I can't believe I don't do it. And my response to that is simple is not the same as easy.
Hmm.
Simple and easy are two different things because something can be very simple to do, yet you don't do it. And I think what you have to do is with the simple stuff, you can't overlook it. You have to actually get more intentional about doing the simple things, whether it's making a list of people who you've lost touch with, or reaching out to those people, or having those conversations, or introducing them to new people, or telling them who you'd like to be introduced to, or going to work and doing basically the same thing internally. I think the thing is get really intentional about the simple because that's when you're going to get really effective and start to see these relationships form and your networks grow, and you can take all the benefits of that with the more people that you kind of add to your network.
I love that. I love that. And listeners, don't wait until you need it. It should be an
Right.
ongoing
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely.
Because
Yep.
believe me, I waited too long, and
Yep.
I wish I hadn't. And so I think that's an important message: is don't wait, just do it. And
Hmm.
this should be part of your normal weekly routine, is to build relationships with the people around you, the people you used to work with, because you never know when you need need
Hmm.
those connections for you. So don't wait until you need something to make that
Hmm.
connection. I love it, Craig. This has been fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about you, the work you do, and this book?
Best place to find me is usually on LinkedIn. So you can go to LinkedIn and you can look for Greg Roche, the introverted networker. That's kind of my brand that I'm under. You find me, follow me. I'm posting there every weekday, mostly about networking. From there, you can either find my page, Retention and Rewards Partners, or you can find the Introverted Networker newsletter, which is what I post. I put that out once a week and give people sort of my latest thoughts on networking and tips and tricks. All of those things have links to the book and any of my other digital products that are out there. So LinkedIn's the hub. Follow me, connect with me, and from there you can find all the other good stuff.
Well, fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Greg's resources. And the book is called Fast and Easy Guide for Networking for Introverts. And guess what? This will work for extroverts too, building one-on-one
Yep.
relationships. So this
Yep.
is not just for introverts.
Yep.
But if you find yourself leaning more on the
Hmm.
introvert side, this is going to give you some helpful guidance to be able to sort of build that network without
Hmm.
feeling like you got to go to some fake and awkward networking
Hmm.
event. So, Greg, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this. I think that you gave us some really practical advice and techniques that we can use to
Hmm.
keep that network fresh. Especially, we're going to need it. We're all going to need our relationships, and maybe you
Hmm.
don't think you do. Like I didn't think I needed one until
Hmm.
till it affected me. So make sure you keep those networks fresh. Make this a part of your weekly routine. Get this book, follow these links that we have in the show notes below, and connect with Greg. He's the expert. If you got a question, reach out to Greg. He's the one that is the expert, has been thinking about this. He's writing about it. So follow him, and you're going to learn to be a better networker. Greg, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for sharing your expertise with our listeners.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.